For the past several days, the universe has been asking you to slow down, to reflect, and to notice what your heart has been trying to tell you beneath the endless noise of everyday life. It asked you to revisit emotions you believed were already behind you. It placed forgotten memories back into your awareness. It quietly exposed relationships that no longer felt the way they once did. It invited you to question beliefs that had silently guided your decisions for years without ever asking whether they were still true. But something changes now. July 15th and July 16th are not about looking backward anymore. They are about the extraordinary moment when reflection quietly becomes movement. There comes a point in every transformation where the questions become quieter than the answers, where uncertainty slowly gives way to conviction, and where the future you've been sensing for weeks begins taking its very first invisible step toward you. These next 48 hours carry exactly that kind of energy. Most people will completely overlook what is happening because nothing dramatic has to occur for a life to begin changing forever. Sometimes the greatest shift begins with a single thought that refuses to leave your mind. Sometimes it begins with a conversation that lingers in your heart long after it has ended. Sometimes it begins with a silence that finally tells you everything words never could. And sometimes it begins with an inner certainty so quiet that nobody around you notices it except you. Yet months from now, many people will look back at these two ordinary days and suddenly realize that this was the exact moment their direction quietly changed forever. If you've been feeling emotionally different lately, if you've noticed yourself reacting to situations in ways you normally wouldn't, if certain people no longer affect you the way they once did, or if your intuition has become impossible to ignore despite your logical mind continuing to search for proof, don't dismiss those experiences. They are not random. Your awareness has already begun responding to a sequence the sky has been preparing since the beginning of this month. Long before circumstances change, consciousness changes. Long before a new chapter becomes visible, something inside you quietly decides it can no longer continue living inside the previous one. That invisible decision is far more powerful than most people realize because every future is created twice. It is first created inside your awareness, and only afterward does it slowly appear inside your external life. Almost everyone believes the opposite. They imagine that opportunities arrive first, and confidence follows. They believe circumstances improve first, and peace naturally appears afterward. Yet astrology has always suggested something much deeper. The inner world moves first. The outer world slowly follows. That is why these next 2 days deserve your full attention. They are not promising instant miracles or dramatic overnight transformations. They are quietly creating the emotional foundation upon which your next chapter will eventually stand. Think carefully about how nature itself creates change. A sunrise does not suddenly appear across the horizon in a single instant. Long before the first light becomes visible, the darkness has already begun retreating. The earth has already started turning. The transformation has already begun, even though human eyes cannot yet see it. Life often follows exactly the same rhythm. Before relationships change, your standards quietly change. Before new opportunities arrive, your expectations quietly change. Before confidence becomes visible, self-respect quietly begins growing beneath the surface. Every meaningful transformation starts long before anyone notices it, including you. That is exactly what makes July 15th and July 16th so extraordinary. They represent the quiet space between realization and visible change. A space where many people mistakenly believe nothing is happening because they are looking for movement in the wrong place. The real movement is taking place inside your perception. Earlier this week, Mercury invited you to remember. The new moon invited you to begin again emotionally. Hidden truths quietly surfaced one after another, revealing emotional patterns that had shaped your life far longer than you realized. Many people experienced unexpected clarity without understanding why. Some suddenly stopped chasing people who had consumed their thoughts for months. Others realized they had been waiting for closure from someone who was never capable of providing it. Some finally understood that what once felt like rejection had quietly become protection. Others discovered that their greatest obstacle was never another person. It was the invisible belief that they somehow needed permission before fully becoming themselves. None of those realizations happened by accident. They were preparing the emotional landscape for what begins now. Because reflection alone never changes a life. Understanding alone never creates a different future. There always comes a moment when awareness quietly asks one final question. Now that you know the truth, what are you going to do differently? That question begins echoing beneath everything that unfolds over these next 48 hours. Mercury, still moving through its reflective retrograde journey, begins entering a phase where familiar ways of thinking become increasingly difficult to maintain. At the same time, Uranus continues encouraging breakthroughs that rarely arrive through logic alone. Instead, they emerge through intuition, unexpected insight, surprising conversations, unusual coincidences, and moments that seem completely ordinary until they quietly rearrange the direction of your life. Many people misunderstand breakthroughs because they imagine them arriving like lightning, striking from a clear sky. Real breakthroughs often feel much quieter. Imagine spending years trying to solve a complicated puzzle. Every day you stare at the same pieces, convinced something is missing. Then one morning you simply look at the puzzle from a different angle. Suddenly, everything makes sense. No new pieces appeared. Nothing outside the puzzle changed. The only thing that changed was your perspective. Yet that single shift was enough to reveal an answer that had been sitting in front of you all along. That is exactly how these next 2 days begin working beneath the surface. The universe is not necessarily changing your reality overnight. It is changing the way you see your reality. And perception has always been the birthplace of destiny. Because every decision you will ever make depends upon what you believe is possible. Every opportunity you accept depends upon what you believe you deserve. Every relationship you choose depends upon what you believe love should feel like. Change those beliefs, and your entire future quietly begins changing with them. Earlier, I mentioned that every meaningful transformation begins inside your perception long before it becomes visible inside your circumstances. But there is another reason why July 15th and July 16th deserve far more attention than most people realize. These are not simply days of understanding. They are days of acceleration. There comes a moment in every personal journey when the universe quietly stops repeating the same lesson and begins watching what you choose to do with everything you've learned. That moment is now approaching. Over the past several days, your awareness has been changing one realization at a time. Some of those realizations felt gentle. Others may have been uncomfortable. You may have discovered that someone you trusted no longer occupies the same place inside your heart. You may have realized that a dream you fought so hard to protect was actually preventing you from discovering a greater one. Or perhaps nothing dramatic happened at all. Perhaps the only change was that your mind suddenly became quieter. The endless overthinking that had followed you for weeks slowly lost its power. Questions that once demanded immediate answers no longer felt as urgent. If that has happened, do not underestimate it. Peace is often the first sign that your soul has already accepted a truth your conscious mind is still learning to understand. One of the greatest mistakes people make during periods like this is believing that transformation must always feel exciting. In reality, authentic transformation often feels strangely calm. Imagine standing beside the ocean after surviving an enormous storm. For hours, the waves crashed violently against the shore. The wind refused to settle. The sky remained dark. Then, almost without warning, everything became still. At first, the silence feels unfamiliar because your body has grown accustomed to surviving the storm. You almost expect another wave to arrive at any moment, yet it never comes. The sea remains calm. The horizon becomes visible once again. That stillness is not emptiness. It is recovery. Human consciousness behaves in exactly the same way. After weeks or months of emotional struggle, peace can actually feel uncomfortable because your nervous system has forgotten what life feels like without constant uncertainty. During these next 2 days, many people will experience that exact transition. Not because every problem suddenly disappears, but because their relationship with those problems quietly begins changing. There is enormous freedom in realizing that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every emotion deserves to become a decision. Not every memory deserves another chapter. This is where Mercury quietly begins teaching one of its deepest lessons. The mind was never designed to become a prison. It was designed to become a guide. Yet millions of people unknowingly allow yesterday's experiences to write tomorrow's expectations. They assume the next opportunity will end exactly like the last one. They expect new people to repeat old behavior. They prepare themselves for disappointment before life has even offered them another possibility. Eventually, those expectations stop feeling like fear. They begin feeling like reality itself. That is why Mercury's interaction with Uranus becomes so powerful. Uranus does not simply introduce unexpected ideas, it interrupts mental certainty. It asks whether the story you've been telling yourself still deserves to remain the story you continue believing. Imagine reading the same book every evening before going to sleep. Every chapter becomes familiar. Every ending feels predictable. Then one night, someone quietly replaces the final chapters with completely different pages. Suddenly, the story no longer ends where you expected. Everything changes because one assumption quietly disappeared. Life often transforms in exactly that way. The future rarely requires you to become someone else. More often, it simply asks you to stop believing a story that was never completely true in the first place. Perhaps you have quietly believed that love always requires sacrifice. Perhaps you accepted the idea that success always comes through exhaustion. Perhaps somewhere deep inside you concluded that happiness belongs to other people, while your own life will always involve carrying more than your share of emotional weight. None of those beliefs were born from destiny. They were born from experience. Experience can become wisdom, but only if you allow it to teach instead of define you. Otherwise, experience quietly becomes limitation. These next hours gently begin breaking that limitation apart. Not through force, through awareness. Awareness has always been the first step toward freedom, because the moment you can clearly see a pattern, you are no longer completely controlled by it. Earlier this week, the universe asked you to remember. Yesterday, it asked you to release. Today, it quietly asks something even more extraordinary. Are you finally willing to imagine a future that is not built from the emotional expectations of your past? That question may become the most important one you hear this entire month, because every remarkable life begins with someone believing something different is possible before there was visible evidence to support it. Long before the tallest tree appears above the earth, it spends countless days growing roots no one else will ever see. Long before sunrise reaches the horizon, the world remains convinced it is still night. Long before your future becomes visible, your spirit quietly begins preparing itself to receive it. That invisible preparation is already happening now, which is why July 16th should never be viewed as the ending of a story. It is the quiet moment when everything you've learned over the past several days begins becoming part of who you are, instead of remaining ideas you simply understand. There is an enormous difference between knowledge and embodiment. Knowledge changes what you know. Embodiment changes who you become. And once you become someone different internally, life has an extraordinary way of introducing circumstances that finally match the person you have quietly grown into. There comes a point in every transformation where the universe quietly stops giving you signs and begins waiting for your response. That moment often arrives so gently that most people mistake it for an ordinary day. They continue searching for another confirmation, another coincidence, another message, another reason to delay the decision they already know they need to make. Yet July 16th carries a very different kind of energy. It is not asking you to search for more answers. It is asking whether you finally trust the answers you have already received. Earlier, I mentioned that awareness eventually becomes embodiment, but perhaps the greatest misunderstanding surrounding personal transformation is believing that life changes because one extraordinary event suddenly appears out of nowhere. The truth is almost the opposite. Extraordinary lives are usually built through ordinary moments that are treated with extraordinary awareness. Think about a river carving its way through solid stone. It does not accomplish that miracle through one powerful wave. It happens because the water continues moving in the same direction day after day, year after year, until even the strongest rock quietly gives way. Human destiny often unfolds with that same quiet persistence. One healthier decision may seem insignificant today. One honest conversation may appear ordinary. One moment of choosing peace instead of emotional chaos may feel almost invisible. Yet those small moments quietly become the foundation of an entirely different future. This is why the universe has been slowing you down over the past several days. It was never trying to keep you stuck. It was trying to make sure that the next chapter of your life would be built upon wisdom instead of impulse. There is an enormous difference between moving quickly and moving in the right direction. Many people confuse speed with progress. They believe if life is constantly changing, they must be moving forward. yet someone can run in circles for years without ever reaching a new destination. The sky has been quietly teaching the opposite lesson. Slow down. Observe. Understand. Release. Then move with intention instead of fear. That rhythm now begins becoming part of who you are. During these next hours, you may notice that your reactions continue changing in subtle ways. Situations that once triggered anxiety may now create curiosity instead. Conversations that previously demanded immediate responses may suddenly feel comfortable being left in silence. You may even discover that the approval you once desperately searched for no longer carries the same emotional importance. These changes are not signs that you have become emotionally distant. They are signs that your inner stability is quietly becoming stronger than the uncertainty around you. There is remarkable freedom in reaching a place where your peace no longer depends upon another person's choices. Imagine carrying an umbrella every single day because you spent years believing it would always rain. Eventually, the umbrella becomes so familiar that you forget why you started carrying it in the first place. Then one morning, you look up and realize the sky has been clear for a very long time. The umbrella is no longer protecting you from the weather. It is simply preventing you from feeling the warmth of the sun. Emotional protection often works exactly the same way. The walls that once helped you survive can eventually become the walls that keep joy from fully reaching your heart. The universe is not asking you to throw those walls down carelessly. It is gently showing you that some of them no longer serve the person you have become. This realization becomes even more meaningful because the energy surrounding July 16th is quietly encouraging integration rather than reaction. Earlier this month, every alignment seemed to pull your attention towards something unfinished. A memory, a relationship, a question, a fear. Now those scattered pieces begin settling into one complete picture. Instead of feeling emotionally divided between the past and the future, you begin recognizing that both have been working together all along. The past was never your enemy. It was your teacher. The future has never been trying to rescue you. It has been patiently waiting for you to become ready to recognize it. That understanding changes everything because it removes the need to keep fighting your own story. Every difficult chapter suddenly reveals a purpose that remained hidden while you were living through it. Every unexpected ending begins making sense. Every delay quietly transforms from punishment into preparation. This is why so many people later describe their greatest disappointments as the beginning of their greatest blessings. At the time, they only saw what they believed they had lost. Years later, they finally understood what that loss had quietly protected them from and what it eventually made possible. Perhaps the same truth is beginning to unfold within your own life now. Perhaps there are experiences you still judge as mistakes simply because you have not yet reached the place where their purpose becomes visible. Trust that timing. Not everything meaningful reveals itself immediately. Some answers require distance before they can be fully understood. As these 2 extraordinary days slowly come to an end, remember something that is remarkably easy to forget whenever life feels uncertain. Your destiny is not being created by one dramatic event waiting somewhere in the future. It is being created by the person you quietly choose to become today. Every peaceful decision strengthens a peaceful future. Every courageous choice weakens an old fear. Every moment you choose truth over illusion, self-respect over temporary approval, and growth over familiarity quietly changes the direction of your life in ways that cannot yet be measured. That is the deeper message hidden inside July 15th and July 16th. The universe has not been preparing you for one extraordinary moment. It has been preparing you to become the kind of person who no longer needs extraordinary moments to believe in the future. Because once your heart, your intuition, and your awareness begin moving in the same direction, life itself starts opening doors that your old way of thinking could never have recognized. And perhaps months from now, when you look back on these seemingly ordinary days, you will finally understand that this was never simply another point on the calendar. This was the quiet beginning of the moment you stopped asking whether your life was capable of changing and started living as though deep inside you already knew it had.